Hello friends, I welcome you all to this particular edition of Daily News Analysis. So in this particular edition, we are going to discuss some very important articles that are part of Hindu as well as Indian Express newspapers today. So let's go through the article listing first. So these are some of the articles that we are going to go through today. So the first and foremost important news is about the Startup India mission. So our Prime Minister has praised this particular mission, calling it a revolution. So in recent times, the Startup India mission has completed a decade of its inception, 10 years obviously. So very important scheme from the perspective of prelims as well as mains. Another important news is about EU leaders being a chief guest at Republic Day Parade 2026, and also our trade minister's statement that India-EU trade deal on the horizon. He called it a mother of all trade deals. So we are going to take a look at these particular developments as well. Particularly India-EU trade deal, we have discussed a lot on this forum already multiple times. Another important article is about Supreme Court wanting government to consider Romeo-Juliet exception for POCSO Act. So what exactly is this Romeo-Juliet exception is very important, and why this particular provision the Supreme Court or even High Court wants to get included in the POCSO Act is very important, and what is the reluctance of say the government towards this particular provision is also something very vital from the perspective of GS2. Another important article is about the Kaziranga National Park. Obviously, in Kaziranga, elevated corridor lifts hope of curbing animal deaths. So this particular wildlife corridor again is very vital from the perspective of GS3 environment part, because there are many times the deaths of animals due to say vehicular collision, because there is main sort of national highway that goes through Kaziranga National Park. That particular highway is very important from the perspective of say connectivity to the east sort of Assam, particularly North Assam, from East Assam to North Assam essentially. So this corridor will help the animals in particular to actually bypass this particular national highway that goes through Kaziranga. So this project is being inaugurated by the Prime Minister. So very important news from the perspective of environment here. And another important article is about why this winter feels snowless. Although we are all experiencing the winter, particularly in the northern region, severe winter, the temperatures have plummeted. But if you observe the snow, the snowfall in the say Himalayas particularly has declined particularly this year. So this trend is very concerning. So from the perspective of say prelims and so from the perspective of overall geography, this particular aspect is important to know. So let's discuss the first article. So obviously the Startup India mission, a revolution, Prime Minister says highest annual spike saw 44,000 startups added last year, Prime Minister Modi. So the foremost purpose of Startup India mission is obviously to promote entrepreneurship, to promote innovation, and to promote overall startup economy in such a way that it will also create the new employment. What our Prime Minister has now said is that last year almost 44,000 startups were added. So this is a revolutionary sort of news vis-a-vis say this particular scheme. So let's look into it. Nearly 44,000 startups registered with the government in 2025. Again a record, the highest annual addition since Startup India was launched. So Startup India was launched obviously on January 16, 2016. So remember this particular date, very important. Okay, you may get a question in prelims about or statement that the stand-up or Startup India mission was launched on this particular date. So very important date here, the flagship initiative to seek foster innovation, promote entrepreneurship and enable FDI as well, investment driven growth. So this is also one of the foremost targets of the government before launching this particular scheme. So what the Prime Minister has now said is there is surge in India's startup momentum. Prime Minister Modi highlighted that the momentum of Startup India is steadily accelerated, and rather it is accelerating further as well, with nearly 44,000 new startups just last year. From startups to unicorns and IPOs, Mr. Modi noted, our Prime Minister noted a clear progression in the ecosystem. Startups are scaling into unicorns, and unicorns are essentially launching IPOs, and collectively they are creating large scale employment. So, as I earlier said, one of the foremost priority for the government for launching this particular scheme is employment generation, and that's what is happening. Our Prime Minister has claimed this. Although we have seen lot many startups becoming unicorns, and unicorns launching IPOs. So lot on this particular aspect, I will say lot many startups have the potential to launch to become unicorns and launch IPOs. This reflects the growing maturity of India's entrepreneurship landscape as well, entrepreneurial landscape particularly. India is a global startup hub. So this particular aspect is very important. Today, over 2 lakh startups and nearly 125 active unicorns are there in India. This particular, statistic is important. Note it down. You can utilize this statistic in your mains answers effectively as well. These figures demonstrate how startups are driving innovation, growth, and ecosystem development. So these are also, sort of byproducts of focusing on entrepreneurial economy. Fewer than 500 startups were there, and only 4 unicorns were there before 2014. And the jump in the number of startups and unicorns in this regard in just 10 years is revolutionary, pretty much revolutionary. Changing attitude towards risk taking. Our Prime Minister also talked about, say, risk taking ability of our, entrepreneurial class. So today entrepreneurial risk is mainstream and respected. So this is also a very important point. Earlier, what used to happen is people tend to, not take risks because of fear of failure. Although that sort of fear, that sort of concern is still there among our business class particularly. Government support through fund of funds. Another important scheme that was launched in recent time is Fund of Funds 2.0. Although earlier we had Fund of Funds, the government has invested over 25,000 crore through Fund of Funds for startups, strengthening access to capital and encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship in the process. Focus on deep tech. So what exactly is this Fund of Funds 2.0? So remember these, these important points associated with the scheme also. Fund of Funds 2.0. So essentially, launching of the fund so that these funds can be, can act as a credit for, say, upcoming entrepreneurs. So essentially, Fund of Funds was, a recent initiative of the government which was launched in April 2025 with 10,000 crore corpus that will prioritize deep tech sectors such as AI and machine learning, quantum technology, defense and aerospace. So these are deep tech sort of sectors that this Fund of Funds 2.0 will focus on. Remember this particular aspect, very, very important. Deep tech and its meaning is also very important. Given the long gestation period of such ventures, the focus will be on providing greater risk capital. Obviously, the purpose is to provide capital to the entrepreneurs in deep tech technologies. So that will promote our deep tech entrepreneurship further. So Stand Up India, Startup India, and correspondingly we have Stand Up India scheme being launched at that point of time as well. So let's briefly go through this particular scheme, very important as well. Stand Up India is a government initiative launched in 2016 again to promote entrepreneurship among SCs, STs and women by facilitating bank credit and institutional support. Promote inclusive entrepreneurship, bank finance. So some sort of, equity and, affirmative action, I will say, that has brought by the Stand Up India mission, because it is focusing on the vulnerable section, the entrepreneurship among the vulnerable section. Bank loans between 10 lakh and 1 crore will be given to the entrepreneurs from SC, ST, women categories. One loan each for at least one SC, ST entrepreneur and at least one women entrepreneur per bank branch. So this is very, very important aspect. Loans for manufacturing, service, trading, एंड कंपोजिट लोन कवरिंग टर्म लोन, वर्किंग कैपिटल वगैरह के लिए भी लोन दिया जाता है. दैट्स द केस. स्टैंड अप इंडिया इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सपोर्ट मैकेनिज्म यू कैन क्लियरली go through. See, most of the time, important aspect to know is convergence with schemes like Mudra, Skill India and Startup India. So, there is a convergence of Stand Up India scheme with these schemes. So, very, very important to know about Mudra and Skill India as well, although I didn't include these two schemes here. Okay, so just go through those two schemes as well, very, very important. You can clearly see the targeting beneficiaries, SC, ST and women, and some of the achievements that has been given here. Okay, no problem about it. Again, the fund of funds 2.0. Earlier, as I said, fund of funds focuses on deep tech sector. Total corpus 10,000 crore. Mode of funding, essentially, it is an indirect investment. It is giving, sort of credit to the deep tech entrepreneurs. The government does not invest directly in startups. Instead, it invests in SEBI registered alternate investment funds. So, this is also very something very, very vital here. So, government does not invest directly in startups. So, this is very important aspect from the perspective of prelims. Remember this particular aspect, that instead government invests in alternate investment funds associated with SEBI registered AIFs, which then fund these startups. So, very, very important. It brings essentially some sort of transparency and accountability in the overall investment mechanisms of the government. Key focus areas, obviously, fund of funds 2.0 focuses on deep tech sectors, as I earlier said. Rationale, obviously, deep tech startups require large capital, as I earlier said. Many struggles to reach the proof of concept stage. For 2.0 aims to de-risk early investments. So, de-risking is one of the important objectives behind launching this particular fund of funds 2.0. Implementing agency here is very important from the perspective of prelims. Implemented through SIDBI, Small Industries Development Bank of India, as with earlier fund of funds. So, fund of funds and fund of funds 2.0 is being implemented by SIDBI. Remember that. Very important, okay, from the perspective of prelims. Expected impact you can clearly see, and this is the practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. Very important scheme, important question from the perspective of prelims. Remember that Startup India and essentially Stand Up India also will complete a decade of their inception. So, very, very important schemes. Two developments regarding India EU in the next update. EU leaders to be chief guest at Republic Day, and India EU trade deal on the horizon, one of the largest trade deals according to our trade minister. So, he is calling it a mother of all trade deals. So, when it comes to say Republic Day events and its preparations, our defense secretary has said that European Union leaders Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, and Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, will be the chief guest at India's 77th Republic Day celebration. So, this particular aspect, the objective, information in this para is very, very, very important. Remember that. Okay. So, I have, circled three important, points here: European Council, European Commission, and 77th Republic Day. Okay. So, European Council versus European Commission is also very, very important. Very, very interesting, the organizational structure associated with EU, European Union. Okay. So, and obviously, we have our 77th Republic Day. Obviously, we know why we celebrate the Republic Day. Okay. I hope you all know. Okay. The free trade agreement with the European Union will be the mother of all trade deals when compared with the 7 deals India has signed with developed countries. So, in this particular, point, what is the most objective point here is that 7 deals India has already signed. So, with which of the countries India has signed the trade deal is very, very important. Just comment in the comment section with which of the 7 countries, particularly the developed countries, India has signed the trade deals, the free trade agreements particularly. Very, very, very important, that particular knowledge from the perspective of prelims. Theme of the Republic Day celebration. So, let us look at our Republic Day celebrations and some of the preparation points that are currently ongoing. So, what will be the theme of the Republic Day parade, by the way? Republic Day parade on January 26 will be themed around 150 years of Vande Mataram. We have already covered this particular news extensively on our platform, on our Next Rise YouTube channel, the 150 years of Vande Mataram, and we have the whole parliamentary debate around this particular topic as well. Okay, so a theme that will also anchor beating retreat ceremony. So beating retreat ceremony का भी theme यही है. Remember that. The parade will last around 90 minutes and be held along Kartavya Path. Obviously, end of VIP culture. You can utilize this particular point in your main sensors as well. End of VIP culture. So what the government has did this year in a symbolic stand to end VIP culture, enclosures at the Republic Day parade will be named after rivers of India. Okay, so they will not be called VIP enclosures now. Okay, they will be named after rivers of India. The beating the retreat ceremony will be named after musical instruments. Earlier, these were referred to as VIP enclosures. So this particular aspect is very, very important, that has been announced by, say, the Defense Secretary in recent times. So end of VIP culture is although a symbolic, we will see what sort of impact it will have, but still very, very good step. First time military showcases some of the important aspects of the parade here. The parade will feature several new military displays. What will be those several new military displays this year on the parade? Bhairav Battalion will be there for the first time. Shaktiban regiments will participate. Drone Shakti is showcased. A universal rocket launcher will also be part of the parade as well. So important aspects, remember to in detail know about each of these important sort of parade points. Okay, battle array demonstration. Some of the major highlights will be the phased battle array format of the Indian Army with live commentary explaining operational roles of the formations, deployment of equipment. Aerial component will also be presented in the battle of formation, in the battle formations. So we have all seen the battle formations, but this year there will be something new with live commentary. International participation. For the first time, European naval contingent will participate in the Republic Day parade, reflecting India's growing defense diplomacy. The European naval contingent will participate for the first time as well. Cultural opening and marching contingents will be there. The celebration will begin with 100 cultural artists performing using Indian martial music instruments. Marching contingents will include Bhairav contingent in Uncha Kadam Tal and Ladakh Scouts as well. So as I said, Bhairav Battalion will be there for the first time. Animal contingent will also be there, particularly showcasing Zaskar ponies, Bactrian camels, and dogs will highlight India's diverse and challenging operational terrain. Bactrian camels is very, very important from the perspective of prelims. Scale of participation you can clearly see. 18 marching contingents, 13 military bands will be there. Flypast highlights the flypast will feature aircraft and helicopters. Which are those aircrafts? Rafale, Sukhoi 30, MiG-29, P-8I, C-130, C-295, Apache, LCH, ALH, Mi-17 helicopters, and displayed in various formations. So all these, formations, all these aircrafts and helicopters are very, very, very important. I didn't go through in detail on each of these, each of these aircrafts and helicopters, but you must go through each of these defense systems and what are their specific points, specialities. So very, very important. Just go through them as well. Another important aspect is tableau and artistic displays. So this year there will be 6 states tableaus and union departments will present tableaux centered on Vande Mataram. Again, the theme. Paintings by artist Tajendra Kumar Mitra illustrating verses of Vande Mataram will be displayed along Kartavya Path. So this is also very important. So until this point, it is about our preparation for, say, Republic Day Parade 2026. Another important news, very important, India-EU trade deal related developments. Okay, let's see what our Commerce Minister, Trade Minister says. Commerce Minister Goyal described the proposed free trade agreement FTA between India and European Union as mother of all trade deals, surpassing all trade agreements India has signed so far with the developed countries. Mr. Goyal neither confirmed nor denied January 27 deadline. So there is no fixed deadline yet to actually conclude those trade negotiations. Okay, India's track record in trade deals since 2014, India has signed 7 trade agreements with developed economies. As I earlier said, as I earlier told you to name those 7, developed countries. Essentially, there is United Kingdom, there is Mauritius, UAE, EFTA countries, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Oman. Early harvest deal with Australia as well. Okay, so these are some of the countries with which India has already signed trade deal. A win-win super deal. So with EU, India, EU FTA particularly will be a win-win super deal, because it will be complementary economic interests that will take care of your our complementary economic interest, make the agreement mutually beneficial and strategically significant for both the blocks. Do not directly compete in key sectors, because see, each India and EU has their own comparative advantages vis-a-vis trade, and due to the trade deal particularly, both the blocks, the India as well as EU, are poised to benefit. EU receives favorable access to its areas of interest. He described the deal as super deal essentially. Let's look at the basics now. The basics that are there in the articles, like EU Council versus EU Commission. Council of the European Union represents EU member states, governments. European Commission represents interest of European Union as a whole. So this is the basic sort of difference between the two. You can go through these particular points here. Very important. Primary functions also you can go through. The EU Commission proposes EU legislation, implements EU laws and policies, enforces EU treaties, acts as the guardian of the EU law, manages EU program and budget spending, while EU Council co-legislates EU laws with European Parliament, coordinates national policies, approves EU budget, concludes international agreements, shapes EU's foreign and security policy. So EU Council and EU Commission has different mandate, remember that, okay. Particularly EU Commission no final law making power, EU Council के पास final decision making on laws and policies है, okay. So these are some important differences between EU Council and EU Commission. By the way, role in trade and external relations, this is also something sort of pertinent now. Essentially EU Council authorizes trade negotiation, approves final trade agreement, but negotiation part जो है EU Commission का है. So negotiation of trade agreements on behalf of the EU represents EU in bodies like WTO. That is the work of European Commission. Accountability: EU Council accountable to national governments and parliaments, EU Commission accountable to European Parliament. Remember that. So there is a basic difference, fundamental difference between EU Commission and EU Council. Another important aspect from the perspective of prelims, okay. I am very much positive that such sort of question will be there in prelims this year. What is this question? What are the common members between, say, NATO and EU? Okay, very important. Common members between EU and NATO, the members who are there in NATO but not in EU, who are there in EU but not in NATO. So that is also very important. Okay, Austria is not in NATO, it is neutral, excluded essentially, but it is part of EU. Actual common EU NATO members, which are the EU members which are also NATO members. Majority of them are NATO members, remember that, but not all. Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain and Sweden. These are the countries which are common between, say, EU and NATO. Another important point is countries in the EU but not in NATO. Austria, Ireland, Malta, Cyprus. These are countries in EU but they are not part of NATO alliance. Remember that. Again, countries in NATO but not in the EU. So this particular aspect is also important. US, UK, Canada, Turkey, Norway, Iceland, Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia. So these are the countries who are members of NATO but NATO yes, not EU no. Okay, so very important. Most of the time ये नॉर्वे, आइसलैंड, अल्बानिया, मॉन्टेनेग्रो, इसी में ये आपको कंफ्यूजन हो सकता है. ओके, सो रिमेंबर दीज important points, particularly from the perspective of prelims, very vital. 23 countries are members of both EU and NATO. Remember the common countries. Again, Bhairav Battalion will be there for the first time on in our Republic Day. We have already covered this particular news in our various platforms of NextIS. Okay, so just move forward. The Bhairav Battalion, but to give you the short idea, Bhairav Battalion is a specialized light infantry unit of the Indian Army. So it is a specialized unit of our Indian Army which trains in high intensity rapid response and specialized operations. So this is the specific mandate of Bhairav Battalion. They work in specialized operations in whether in high terrain or high risk situations as well. Conduct specialized combat and strike operations, operate in high altitude, extreme weather, difficult terrain. So their sort of training is also very grueling. Operational significance, agile and technology enabled units. So this is very important in the era of hybrid warfare. This particular battalion is very important. In recent times, you must have seen the US sort of operation against Venezuela, in which they captured the Venezuelan president, and that particular battalion has the commandos in that particular battalion essentially are engaged in such high profile sort of and high risk operations. So this is the similar battalion, our own battalion of Indian infantry, Indian military, essentially faster mobilization and strike capabilities there with respect to this particular Bhairav battalion. Represents innovation and transformation within Indian Army. So this is the main purpose of our Bhairav battalion. Again, very important, this particular question you cannot miss. Okay, so comment your answer in the comment section to this particular question. Very important mapping based question hai. Obviously you must understand the common members between EU and NATO. So the next important article is about SC wants government to consider Romeo-Juliet exception for POCSO Act. Okay, so what exactly is this Romeo-Juliet exception, we are going to see. But before that, what the Supreme Court is now demanding from the government is to change, legislatively change the POCSO Act, Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012. So specifically the bench comprising Sanjay Karol and N. Koteshwar Singh in recent times recommended the introduction of Romeo-Juliet clause to exempt genuine adolescent relationships from the law designed to punish the child sexual abuse. So what the Supreme Court or the higher judiciary is worried about is the misuse of the POCSO Act to punish the adolescent sexual relationships. Okay, so teenage love. So what is the Supreme Court argues here is teenage love is being criminalized. Okay, and this particular clause is being abused by the system. Many times what happens is, if the girl is just 16 years old and the boy is just 17 years old, they fall in love. Okay, but they are not consenting adults yet, because under the POCSO Act, age of consent is 18 years of age. So essentially what happens is, in case of these two adolescents, their love or their sort of union is not acceptable under the act, and essentially the parents of the girl may file the case against the boy, and the boy gets arrested by the police. Although what in recent times we have seen many high courts actually and even Supreme Court taking the side of the adolescent boy and actually highlighting the aspect of, say, teenage love being criminalized. Okay, but by that time, by the time Supreme Court, High Court rules, that innocent boy would have just spent months in jail. So and that will give a sort of mental trauma to the adolescent sort of boy as well. So there are such cases. So essentially what the Supreme Court now wants is to have Romeo-Juliet clause being introduced in the POCSO Act, so that such adolescent relationships are exempted, or rather they are they are not being criminalized under the law. Supreme Court's observation highlights growing judicial discomfort with criminalization of consensual sexual acts between the minors. So what exactly is this Romeo-Juliet clause? The clause named after the young characters from the Shakespeare of the same name. Obviously we know the Romeo-Juliet sort of play by the Shakespeare essentially protects consensual sexual activity among the teens who are close to each other in age, exempting them from prosecution for the statutory rape. It exists in different forms in countries such as US. So it does exist in certain countries particularly. So what exactly is the debate? First and foremost, it is the debate between protection versus autonomy. So what the government is concerned about is the protection of our adolescent population, of our minors particularly. Under the act, the POCSO Act, everyone under the age of 18 are considered minors, the adolescents essentially, and 18 is the age of consent here, okay. But what the Supreme Court is concerned is about the the autonomy of teenage love, okay. So under the POCSO Act, a child is defined as any person who is below the age of 18. Act does not recognize minors' consent to sexual acts. So any sexual activity involving a person under 18 is automatically criminalized regardless of whether it is consensual or non-exploitative. It is very true. Obviously, that's the purpose of say the POCSO Act itself. So to actually deter the growing cases of child sexual abuse. In its judgment Friday, the Supreme Court noted that while POCSO Act is a solemn articulation of justice, its misuse has created a grim societal chasm. So why this particular point the Supreme Court wants to highlight is the criminalization of teenage love, okay. So there is there needs to be exception according to the Supreme Court to the POCSO Act, which does not criminalize the teenage love particularly. The demand for change, there is always a demand for change. The push to amend the law is not new. It has gained momentum due to pending PIL in the Supreme Court. The PIL, public interest litigation, is pending in the Supreme Court. Case concerns safeguarding prosecuting sexual offences. Arguments by Indira Jain Singh. So Indira Jain Singh has been the esteemed lawyer here, has been designated as amicus curiae in the case, by the way. And what she wants to highlight here is blanket criminalization violates Article 15, 19, 21 and 14. That's what her arguments are. She argued adolescents aged 16 and 18 have evolving capacity and sexual autonomy. She calls it a mature minor doctrine. So remember this particular word, mature minor doctrine. In case of say judiciary, particularly judiciary related developments, there will be question in mains also, in mains 2026 regarding say the misuse of POCSO Act. You can utilize such terms effectively in your answers. Mature minor doctrine. So she said training all under 18 as incapable ignores biological reality, okay. So obviously there is a blanket ban below the 18. So age 18 is the age of consent, not 16 or not 17, just 18. So, and according to her, mature minor doctrine will protect such relationships. What exactly is this mature minor doctrine? Mature minor doctrine is a principle from common law. Obviously, it recognizes that some minors have sufficient maturity and understanding to make certain personal decisions. It focuses on capacity, not just chronological age. So this particular point is very, very important here. That will define overall the concept of mature minor doctrine. So you have to look at the capability, not just chronological age, while deciding the maturity of the person. Under this doctrine, a minor who shows adequate intellectual and emotional maturity can give consent, okay, can give valid consent. It can be considered here the valid consent even if he has not achieved say the age of consent according to the particularly constitutional administrative law. But common law will definitely support mature minor doctrine. So remember that. What she also proposes is close in age exception. If not, total Romeo-Juliet exception, you can have close in age exception for say 16-year-old and 17-year-old relationships being excluded. The aim is to prevent misuse of the POCSO Act. It seeks to avoid incarceration of the non-coercive cases. So this is sort of middle ground. This can be a middle ground one way, that you can have close in age exceptions for say 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. Definitely 16 to 18-year-olds can have the exemption. The relationship between such adults, adolescents can be an exception to the POCSO Act. That's what the Indira Jain Singh is suggesting. So the government definitely stands for status quo here. It doesn't want to change the law itself. Essentially, this particular transformative law was passed way back in 2012 after the horrible Nirbhaya case of 2012, and government wants to preserve the law and its strictness as it is. It wants to have the age of consent at 18. It rejects introducing any legislative exception as demanded by the Supreme Court. It told the Supreme Court that 18 years is a deliberated and well considered choice. The age limit is meant to act as a non-negotiable protective shield for children. So there is, if there is one exceptions, there is always it tends to get misused, that particular exception as well. So the fear of misuse cannot be the ground to actually bring in the exception as demanded by the Supreme Court. Defense of strict liability under POCSO. So government defends strict liability, saying the government argued that minors lack the capacity to give meaningful consent. So this particular aspect is very important. Minors cannot give meaningful consent, even if it is between the two consenting minors. The one minor particularly, or both these minors are not adult themselves, that their consent can be considered as a valid consent under the law. It defended the strict liability framework of the POCSO Act. Consent is irrelevant under this legal structure. Consent is irrelevant under this legal structure. Essentially, until the age of 18, you don't have the consent at all. The age of 18 gives you the consent. Children are vulnerable to manipulation and coercion by adults. Exception could create loopholes. So that's what I also told you, that exception cannot be just the ground for, say, inclusion of any sort of relaxation in the law. Judicial discretion, data and health implications. So this point is also important. The government favored case by case judicial discretion. What the government wants is case by case judicial discretion or statutory dilution. So it doesn't want to statutorily dilute the law. As I said, in 2023, even Law Commission of India advised against lowering the age of consent. It suggests guided judicial discretion in sentencing for consensual cases involving 16 to 18-year-olds. So clause of age exception, it should be based on the judicial discretion. Judicial discretion can guide in this regard, but they cannot change. The law cannot be relaxed. A study by Enfold Proactive Health Trust and UNICEF found that many POCSO cases to be romantic in nature. Families often misuse the law to regulate daughters autonomy. That is very true. Such cases show low conviction rates as victims support the accused in most of the cases. Mandatory reporting under POCSO deters adolescents from seeking reproductive and sexual health services as well. So this is also affects their mental health in particular. Judicial discretion but is inadequate. Currently, courts across India have been navigating the grey area through discretion. Very true. Various high courts have over the years quashed criminal proceedings in romantic cases, noting that the purpose of POCSO Act was not to punish teenage love, but to protect the minors from sexual offences committed by the adults. But by then, the accused boy has spent months in years in custody, as I said. So judicial discretion has its own capacity, particularly has its own sort of limitations. POCSO Act, the basic is given here, just go through it, very not much that important. Age of consent, again under the act is it is 18 year. Mandatory reporting provisions, as I said, very, very important provision. Punishment, stringent penalties including long-term imprisonment is there. Concerns and criticisms we already know, okay. And recent debate, you can clearly see the Supreme Court debate on, say, the Romeo-Juliet exception, Romeo-Juliet clause particularly. The Supreme Court wants to include that particular clause. But let's see what the government, obviously the government oppositions to such clause is out in the open. So there is no such, in near time we will not see the law being judicial, the law being, parliamentarily changed. Okay. So remember that. The next important article is about Kaziranga. In Assam's Kaziranga, elevated corridor lifts hope for curbing animal deaths. Very, very important. Many times, the main highway passes through the Kaziranga National Park, and due to the vehicular collusion, many rhinos, many important animal species of the Kaziranga National Parks have died. Okay, so this particular corridor, the 34.5 km corridor, is very important. It will it will create some sort of corridor for animals to pass through, to bypass the highway. Essentially, the 6950 crore corridor will be part of major existing national highway connecting the national park eastern Assam to the state capital Guwahati, and its aim is to enable safer passage for animals to cross. Currently, the highway disrupts their natural movement during floods. So, during floods, definitely there are casualties. Elevated corridor, definitely the project is for the elevated corridor. Okay, the Kaziranga National Park particularly, which has the world's largest population of one-horned rhinoceros and is home to 37 species of mammals. Nearly 500 species of birds is located in the national park. Very important, and it is obviously the part of Brahmaputra floodplain in central Assam's Nagaon and East Assam's Golaghat districts. National Highway 715, earlier NH 37, a crucial roadway connecting Tezpur, a major town on the north bank of the Brahmaputra, to towns in eastern Assam, forms the southern boundary of the national park, and across it lie the hills of Kabi Anglong. So, this particular aspect is very important, very pertinent from the perspective of prelims. Kaziranga National Parks and its boundaries here. In October this year, the Union Government Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs approved the widening of 2 lanes 86.675 km stretch of this highway to 4 lanes. So, widening is ongoing. See, roadway and connectivity projects obviously are very important for, say, the overall economic development of Assam, but it is creating problems for the animals of Kaziranga National Park. That is why this elevated corridor is there to decongest the existing corridor, improve safety and enhance the direct connectivity between Guwahati, Kaziranga National Park, KNP, and industrial towns of Numaligarh. So, very important sort of elevated corridor. Highway as a major threat. Obviously, highway often acts as a major threat to animals. Ecological landscape beyond park boundaries. According to the Wildlife Trust of India, the habitat extends beyond park boundaries. Obviously, it includes Brahmaputra floodplains, wetlands, grasslands, and the highlands of Karbi Anglong. Very important. Animals naturally move across this landscape, and that's why this elevated corridor will will not disrupt their migration patterns. Floods and disrupted animal corridors. Flooding in Kaziranga National Park is a natural process. Animals move to higher grounds during floods and return later. Highways and human settlements now block the traditional corridor. So, this is also the major reason for, say, often man-animal conflicts and the deaths or due to vehicular collusion of animals. Traffic volume and roadkill data. The highway records have an average daily traffic of about 13,800 passenger vehicles. So, this is also huge passengers that essentially use this particular highway. A study by Guwahati University found 6,000 animals killed on a stretch of NH 715. So, on this particular NH 715 stretch, almost 6,000 animals were killed. The study period was between 2016, and in 1 year, the 6,000 animals, about 63.6% of the road kills occurred during the flood season. So, flood season is the major reason, and sort of now the elevated corridor will help animals to navigate floods effectively. Most of the time during floods, animals actually go to higher lands in Kaziranga National Park, but when the floods recede, they come back. But while having this particular journey, they need to pass through these highways, and essentially most of these highways have such huge vehicular traffic, and they tend to collide with these vehicular traffics, and essentially this elevated corridor will help that in that regard. See, it is eco-friendly designed. Mitigation designs are needed. Development should continue, but with wildlife sensitive planning. Okay, speed and reduction is also essential. Although the corridor has been built, to certain extent these steps needs to be taken. Forest Department estimate traffic through Kabi Anglong Kaziranga landscape is increasing daily. Continuous vehicle movement blocks animal passage. According to Divisional Forest Officer, the safe passages must be ensured. Diverting heavy traffic to elevated roads is also suggested. Existing mitigation measures have been given. Debate on large scale infrastructure. Activists fear construction of a sensitive or in a sensitive zone may disturb wildlife. See, the 4 laning of highway that particular highway is also a big concern, although there is an establishment of elevated corridor for the passage of animals, but it will not means alleviate the concerns associated with excess infrastructure built up in and around the Kaziranga National Park. So that remains a concern. Overpass as a long-term solution. Overpasses are a long-term solution. So elevated corridors and overpasses can be a long-term solution. Developmental and conservation must go and progress together. That's what needs to happen. Now, the most important part is the basics of Kaziranga National Park. From the perspective of environment prelims, very important. Particularly one-horned rhinoceros that is found in the Kaziranga National Park. KNP, essentially Indian rhinoceros, scientific name Rhinoceros unicornis. Unicorn because sort of it has one horn, characterized by a single black horn and armor-like skin. Okay. Habitat and distribution, very important. Found in northern India and southern Nepal also. So it is not only found in India. Indian rhinoceros is found in Nepal as well, remember that, okay. So most of the time people get confused a lot in such statements. Prefer alluvial floodplains, grasslands and wetlands. Major population in KNP, although there are many other national parks as well, in which you will find the sporadic population of these one-horned rhinoceros. The vulnerable IUCN Red List, it is vulnerable under the IUCN Red List. India hosts over 75% of the global population. Key threats, what are some of the key threats here? Poaching, habitat fragmentation, road and highways is also a concern. Conservation measures protected under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act, and we have anti-poaching patrols and habitat management. Translocation projects to spread population risks as well. Okay, so that is there are some projections or conservation measures that have been taken in recent times, and the rhino numbers have bounced back. Okay, so there are positive developments. Flagship species of India's grassland ecosystem. Obviously, it is a flagship species. Remember that, very important, and it actually promotes ecotourism. The tourism of Assam is also propelled by, say, Kaziranga National Park. Types of rhinoceros in the world. This is also something interesting and important. See, there are currently 5 species of rhinoceros found across Africa and Asia. So we have African rhinos, particularly white rhinos, black rhinos, and you have Asian rhinos. There is one-horned Indian rhinoceros, you have Javan and you have Sumatran. Okay, so go through these slides, very important. IUCN status for these rhinos is important. Okay, white rhinoceros is near threatened, black critically endangered. See, there are 3 species out of 5 which are critically endangered today. Black rhinoceros is critically endangered, and you have Javan and Sumatran rhinoceros also, both are critically endangered. One-horned Indian rhinoceros is vulnerable, remember that. Okay, very important. So this is practice question for you, just comment your answer in the comment section. Very important question from the perspective of prelims, by the way. Another important article is why this winter feels snowless, although we are feeling the temperatures of winter, but Uttarakhand and Himachal to Jammu and Kashmir, this winter is dry. So it is sort of a dry winter, and we are going to see what can be some of the reasons. But let's look at the news itself. In December and January, Uttarakhand received no rainfall at all. Himachal Pradesh recorded the 6th lowest rainfall in December since 1901, while J&K received very little rain and snow in January according to the data from IMD. Earlier, what used to happen? There used to be a snowfall in December and January, heavy snowfall sometimes, but this winter is pretty much dry. As a result, the Himalayan states have unusually bare and snowless mountain peaks in the winter, raising concerns over growing unpredictability in seasonal precipitation, water security and forest fires being increased as well. So these are some of the important aspects associated with less snowfall this year in northern states. It has been a dry winter for India as a whole, with country receiving less than 1/4 of the rainfall that is expected in the first half of January. But the northwest region has particularly hit, getting just 8%. So these are some of the data points associated with IMD. So it is pretty much clear that January and December hasn't given that much of rain nor winter in the northern states like Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal or even Uttarakhand. Dry winters in Himalayas obviously. Severe rainfall deficits are also have been also observed. Dry winter is there. The reasons, this particular slide here shows you the reasons for this particular dry winter. So, role of western disturbance. So, weakened western disturbance is often considered a reason for such shortfall. Winter rainfall in north and northwest India is usually caused by western disturbances which interact with moisture laden winds from say Bay of Bengal or the Arabian Sea. This interaction typically creates precipitation over the Himalayas, benefiting rabi crops in the plains, recharging groundwater aquifers in the higher altitudes as well. But why does the rainfall fail this year? Although 8 western disturbances crossed the northern India in December above the normal of 6, they produced little rain. Except experts explain this disturbance by the disturbances lacked sufficient moisture. So, lack of sufficient moisture is one reason, although we have northwest, particularly the western disturbances that have been that have passed through say northern India in the month of December more than average, but most of them lacked sufficient moisture. The low pressure trough were shallow. So, there will be shallow low pressure troughs, okay, that does not propel those particular rain systems to follow up. Systems moved northward at a higher latitudes. So, this whole system moved northward to the more higher latitudes as a result. So, there will be element of say climate change involved as well. As a result, limited precipitation occurred in Kashmir and parts of Himachal Pradesh, while Uttarakhand remained largely dry. Okay. Another important problem is declining snow persistence. Snow persistence, the meaning of it is reduced snowfall has been compounded by lower snow persistence, meaning snow melts faster due to higher daytime temperatures and large diurnal temperature variations. So, this is also very important. Snowfall is there, but it melts very easily due to higher daytime temperatures, and there is a diurnal range of temperature that is higher. Essentially, diurnal means the average temperature of daytime and average temperatures of night time. If there are wide fluctuations in these temperatures, then also the snow melts very quickly and easily. Snowfall in December is more beneficial as it allows moisture to percolate slowly and rainfall available for crops and ecosystems over longer periods. So, essentially it actually leads to some sort of groundwater rejuvenation as well in the higher altitudes, but that will not happen, and it will increase the forest fire incidence as well, because dry winter essentially leads to dry forest floors caused by reduced snowfall have led to increase in forest fires in recent times. Fires have been reported in the Valley of Flowers range within Nanda Devi National Park. So, Nanda Devi National Park is very important from the perspective of say prelims. Nanda Devi Valley of Flowers. Since November 1, over 1600 fire alerts have been recorded in Uttarakhand by the Forest Survey of India using SNPP satellite data. So, we are monitoring the forest fires through satellites, and it is sort of the impact of dry winter is pretty much clear by increasing the forest incidence of forest fires. Impact on glaciers and rivers is also, scientists warn that declining winter precipitation and snow persistence could worsen the Himalayan glacial crisis. So, see, most of the time snowfall and say the resultant water percolation actually feeds many glaciers. So, many rivers that emanate from the glaciers. So, that will actually create water scarcity situations as well. Formation of proglacial and supraglacial lakes, increased risk of glacial lake outburst. So, GLOF will also increase because essentially snow melt because the snow persistence is low. So, essentially it is melting very fast, that will create the risks of GLOF, glacial lake outburst floods, upward shift of the equilibrium line altitude, reduced river discharge over time. So, it will have impact on water security as well, water security in these northern states. So, very concerning sort of development. So, from the perspective of prelims, Nanda Devi National Park, the article mentions Nanda Devi National Park. So, some of the basic points about the Nanda Devi National Park. See, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site along with Valley of Flowers. Remember that, okay, very important point. It is a part of Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, obviously, It is a biosphere reserve. Uttarakhand, Garhwal Himalayas. Location. Geographical features includes the Nanda Devi Peak, India's second highest mountain, characterized by steep valleys and glaciers and alpine meadows. Lies in a high altitude, fragile Himalayan ecosystem as well. So, biodiversity you can clearly see. Bharal blue ship is found. Okay, very, very important. Snow leopard is also found. High level of endemism. See, there are many endemic species which are found. Ecologically, very, very important, region. Conservation concern, forest fires are very, very concerning for this particular national park, Nanda Devi National Park particularly. That's it, and stay tuned for another edition of Daily News Analysis. Thank you.